tinfoil hat. Oh, what the fuck are you guys even talking about?
Global controls will have to be imposed, and a world governing body will be created to enforce them.
Welcome to Tinfoil Hat. We go deep, homeboy. Aaron, open your mind. Drink from the fountain of knowledge. There's lizard people everywhere. That's some interdimensional shit. Wake up, Aaron.
This is only the beginning.
Dude, you just blew my mind.
Are you ready to get your mind blown?
Good morning, Swarm, and welcome to Tinfoil Hat. You know I am. You know I'm here to do. I'm here to rock. That's right. Thank you guys so much for tuning in. We have a wonderful podcast for you today. We have Austin Picard on, and he's coming and break down PATCON, which is basically a operation by the intelligence agencies to infiltrate all these patriotic movements, create patriotic movements just to cause complete and utter chaos and pass legislation. So it's a really great podcast. It's a great interview. Austin Picard's podcast is called the Underclass Podcast. So check it out. Real quick, I want to take a moment to say thank you so much to everybody who has donated to the Chaos Twins project on Indiegogo. Just go to chaostwins.com. We had someone who donated $1,500. He's going to be on the podcast. I can't thank you enough for doing that. We're hitting our goals at the time of this. At the time of recording this, we were almost at 15,000. Our goal is to make an animation. Anything helps, like any donation, even if you want to donate $1. If everyone who listens to this donates $1, we will fly past our goals and be able to put a nice series of animations out. That's our goal. So please join. I love it. And if you want to see me live, I just want to say real quick, Austin, Dallas, you guys crushed. Thank you so much for coming out. So thankful for you guys. Both cities were pure fire. Got to do the mothership, pure fire. I'm blessed. I'm blessed, and I'm blessed that we have such great fans. If you want to see me live, I have some new shows coming up. I am going to be November 24th. I'm going to be at room 237 at the Rabbit Hole Bar. I'm doing a revival. Politics, religion, spirituality, rants, raves, and comedy. Come check it out. Just go to SamTripoli.com for the tickets. And then I'm very excited. I am going to be at on El Monte on December 16th and a Comedy Chaos the 12th of December. Come get weird. Go to SamTripoli.com for all of your ticketing needs. I love you guys very much. You guys are going to love this episode. Well, Austin Picard, enjoy the show. All right, let's get into it real quick. I'm very excited to have him on. We are Instagram besties. He hits me up all the time. I've been trying to make it happen, and we finally made it happen. He's an independent researcher. Please welcome Austin Picard. How are you, brother?
Good, Sam. I appreciate you having me on, brother.
Now, Austin, for those who may not be in our Instagram circle, okay, and they may not be familiar with you, can you tell us a little bit about yourself and where our listeners can find you?
Yeah, basically, I'm just entirely disillusioned by the process, the political process. I don't play the partisan game. I'm 100% unplugged, and I basically just wanted to start a podcast where I could redirect the knowledge that I've acquired over time and try and remain as objective as I can, but also try to maybe present an introductory, perspective to a different perspective, an alternative perspective, right? On basically everything's a psyop, right? Everything's a psychological operation. We're all just being misled by propaganda. It's all Edward Bernays. It's all, so I created a podcast called The Underclass. And it's pretty much the entire theme is I'm anti-war to the core, I say principally, but I am on the war path against the state. I absolutely am philosophically opposed to the state in almost every way. I think that it's the only way you can truly consolidate power to such a degree and compartmentalize legislative decisions to commit insane, tragic war crimes. So I've just been entirely inspired by the anti-war principle that I have to abide by. And all that my hope is that I can introduce other people who are completely just taken hostage, right, by the political divide in our country and just globally, truly, because it's cultural Marxism, man, and it's seated even in the conservative aisle, right? And so I'm only like attempting to wake people up and shake them out of such a ridiculous worldview, right? All you have to do is, I'm not telling you what to think and believe. That's not what I'm attempting to do with each episode. All that I'm trying to do is trigger something in your mind to where you'll remember the next time, right? And so whenever the next fog of war is layered around us and we're trying to be, and they're trying to basically march us into war, right? And that's what they do at all times. And we just witnessed it with Ukraine. I mean, what was the first thing that, and I mean, I just covered this in my Anthrax episode about when Trump was trying to leave Syria. And you have like members of, and again, this isn't like me defending Trump. Not that I should have to disclose that, but it seems like I have to all the time. And when he tried to leave Syria, everyone was up in arms. The military industrial complex was utilizing the media to basically spin war propaganda and claim that we're abandoning the Kurds, the Kurdish forces in the region, right? That we're basically self-interested in allying with us against ISIS at the time in areas of Syria and Iraq. And basically, when he had attempted to withdraw troops, we even have like members of his administration who were in the Pentagon at the time legitimately bragging that they lied to him and misled him on the amount of troops that were in the area, and they 100%, even Mattis, right? Mad Dog Mattis, who was initially Trump's he was in the Pentagon, right? Running the Pentagon for Trump.
Right.
I forget what exactly his position was, but either way, he was the guy who was running. He was running on withdrawing from Syria, right? And so then you appoint a guy who says he's going to quit instead of follow through with your demand to withdraw troops from Syria, which you had promised during your campaign. And so for me, that's just outrageous. But beyond that, you have the mainstream media, and it was the leftist liberals at this point, as MSNBC, who ran this. They legitimately showed video of what they claimed was a war zone in Syria where the Kurds were being destroyed. There's like smoldering, smoke in the horizon. And it was actually a gun range in Kentucky from a gun range night shoot.
Yeah.
Right?
I remember that.
And I mean,
now, do you think they do that? Do you think that is done purposefully or on accident? This is a discussion I had with Rogan one day, and it was basically how I was explaining to him my view of nonlinear warfare. And we didn't quite agree on it, which is fine, but I went back to the Parkland shooting, right, where ABC airs one of the teachers, and the teacher says they're on ABC, makes it to the final product that's aired to the nation, that she saw a police officer in all basically body armor shooting people with a weird gun. And then a video comes out showing 4 guys running from behind a school, throwing a big bag into a truck, and the truck drives off. Which is to me very weird, So you go, I've worked very limited in television, but I've worked with producers before, executive producers, and I know every moment of everything is scrutinized. That nothing that makes to the final product isn't approved. Literally every millisecond is approved.
Exactly.
So how does that make it to the light of day? How does that end up being there and then nobody talking about that moment?
100%. It you know what's crazy is that in Ruby Ridge as well, we'll get into it when Geraldo Rivera and they supposedly this helicopter flies over the property. And this is right after the ATF had rigged the entire woods around the property with mass surveillance, right? It's the craziest story. And Geraldo Rivera and this helicopter pilot, they fly over the property, and then Geraldo tips off the FBI directly and tells him that they were fired upon, right? And the helicopter pilot himself claims that never happened. It was a total lie, right?
Geraldo's sketchy,
all that.
man.
Hold on. So you're
100%.
saying that Geraldo lied, or that?
Are you
that-
serious? I mean, of course. Yeah, I think his role was, well, it could have been. I kind of think that two options are on the table, which were either just completely self-interested sociopath who wants to drive ratings, who wants more media coverage, and wants, oh my God, this helicopter's been fired upon. And so, therefore, these people are clearly out of their minds. They're insane. They're shoot first, ask questions later type of scenario. And I believe that was the major role for him to play, was that they needed a media pretext, right? They needed something that would allow the public to justify the actions of the ATF that were about.
Oh, okay. So now I got what
100.
you're saying. I misunderstood it. He's saying that the people at Ruby Ridge shot at him.
Yeah.
I thought maybe
Exactly.
we had talked about the FBI. Okay. So yeah, that's absolutely insane. Now, the craziest Geraldo Rivera fact is that he is the guy that basically showed the world the Zapruder film.
Yeah.
And like up until somebody just told me, I didn't know that. I don't even know.
You don't remember that with him and Dick Gregory? It was Dick Gregory.
Oh
It's the
my God.
weirdest thing, dude. It's the weirdest.
Back
footage.
The
and to
whole
the
thing
left.
is weird. The whole thing, and what role does Dick Gregory have in the cultural Marxism movement
Right.
of all? I mean, like, it's crazy to me.
Geraldo's
you
done
got-
some weird stuff though. He's not other than that too. He's just really, he seems to be enmeshed somehow with the neocons and the right wing, and the military industrial complex. He's got deep contacts there. He always has. He would always come out with these stories that favored them. Very strange.
I agree.
Don't trust that
Yeah,
guy.
it's a weird situation, but 100% I believe the media and key elements in the media, right? I don't think like every person at each of these media agencies are actually like they have to be key operatives that have been seeded into the media, right? And I believe that's basically how they control the narrative most of the time. And I think like through Operation Mockingbird, like that's been proven, right? That they 100% had like institutionalized Operation Mockingbird to an extent to where they had been, they had their own institutions that were farming out these media representatives that they could utilize to push the narrative for the mainstream. And at least
we see it right
into the
now with the
mainstream.
Israeli-Palestine conflict.
Oh my God.
I mean, what did they get right?
Yeah, that's a good point.
Clearly nothing, right?
And
I
you
mean,
just see these talking heads just running with these narratives way after they were even done. So it's like the 40 babies' heads gone, okay?
Mhm.
And then someone told me, 40 is the 40 years that the Jews wandered the desert. Like,
Oh, yeah.
it's crazy stuff, right? And
Mhm.
then the mass rapes are going on, and then
Oh
they're
my
like,
gosh.
well, these bodies, and we don't even know they were charred beyond. So someone go,
Right.
I go, yeah, the rape story isn't even real. They're like, these bodies were too charred to tell. I go, Yeah, they're too charged to tell. No, you're
Right.
even bringing. So you're full of shit too.
100%. Yeah,
Every
and
story.
Seymour Hirsch, like Seymour Hirsch, Seymour Hirsch. He's
Oh
like
yeah, of course.
Yeah, okay. So apparently he like produced this crazy document that proves that Netanyahu and the IDF and the Israeli government basically funded and armed Hamas, and it was in order to um basically they wanted to, during the elections where the Palestinian Authority, which clearly their representatives were also chosen by the Israeli government, and they weren't properly representing the Palestinian people at all. And so the Palestinians were just pissed. We want actual representation in the Palestinian Authority. So when they had the elections, apparently one of the number one priorities of Netanyahu was they wanted to divide the loyalties of the Palestinians and create this narrative that would allow them a pretext. Mainly, they wanted to associate Palestinians with a radical group, right? A group that was willing to be violent, right? And so, pretty much, the story goes that was the priority in order to set this pretext to then throw out the Abraham Accords, which was the supposed peace deal, which just seemed to only favor Israel.
Bro, it's so crazy because what you're saying right now is the exact game plan that the CIA used for Charles Manson and the hippies.
Oh, God.
It's the exact same game
Ashbury.
plan. It is create this narrative to scare the public about this group of people.
Yep.
It's exactly what they do. They do every time. Every time. And I know, we'll get into it, but I mean, somebody brought this up in one of my tweets. It's like the concert goer attack is the exact same storyline as the Vegas shooting.
Oh gosh, man, the Vegas
helicopters
shooting
and everything.
Oh yeah, yeah, and I forget who it was at the time that owned stock in the helicopter company that was apparently had 3 helicopters in Vegas the night of the shooting. But it was like
an Arab company, wasn't it? Or the Prince?
No, it was actually like a conservative neocon, like some Jeff Sessions type, right? I can't 100% remember or recall who exactly it was, but no, you're right though, XG. This is crazy because Al-Talal or whatever, the cousin of Mohammed bin Salman, he apparently owned, right, like part of the Four Seasons with Bill Gates had co-owned that, and it was like the top 5 floors or whatever of the Mandalay Bay. Mm-hmm. And yeah, the story goes, man. I mean, there was an assassination plot against Mohammed bin Salman, and there's like all this evidence that shows that apparently there was. So Trump had, consider this, right? 2017 is when the shooting happens. Trump had just gotten into office, probably not a year had gone by that time. And basically he had shown public support for Mohammed bin Salman becoming the crown prince or becoming basically the king, the future king of Saudi Arabia. And it was a political alliance. And so Al-Talal had been known for being a Wahhabist, right? Which is a radical Sunni Islam, right? And it's like a radical interpretation of a jihadist form of Islam. And Wahhabism is basically the Saudi version of Islam that's like extremely violent. And anyway, so it turns out that Al-Talal had been funding these radical Wahhabist Sunni jihadist groups, and they were and a lot of them, were affiliated with ISIS, right, at the time, which of course we were arming and funding through Operation Fast and Furious, right, which people have apparently forgotten, or they never have realized that the ATF had a gun walking scandal, which I hope to smear the ATF further in a little while with Ruby Ridge. But clearly, the ATF, they should be completely abolished, man. I mean, it's outrageous.
Well, we're starting to find out that these agencies are just the tack dogs for the elites, and
100%.
the illusion is going away. Law and order is going away, and it's just protect their best interest and just run chaos against the masses. Hey guys, real quick, I want to tell you about our friends at DraftKings. That's right. Listen, there is so much to be thankful for. Family, friends, food, and the NFL all week long. DraftKings Sportsbook is keeping your Thanksgiving week full of action. New customers can bet just $5 on the NFL to score 150 instantly in bonus bets. No matter your appetite, there's something for you. Money lines, parlays, props, live bets, and so much more. You name it, they got it. Listen, I use it. I love using it. I think it's great. I use DraftKings. I do daily fantasy because Daddy loves that action. Okay, I've won some. My boy Johnny Waters won some. Juicy Johnny won a little. Bang,
Yeah,
bang.
Yeah. First time.
Winner, chicken dinner. So download the DraftKings Sportsbook app now and use the code TINFOIL. New customers can bet $5 on the NFL Thanksgiving action to score 150 instantly in bonus bets. Only on DraftKings Sportsbook, an official sports betting partner of the NFL. With the code TINFOIL, the crown is yours.
Gambling problem? Call 1-800-GAMBLER. Visit www.1800gambler.net. In New York, call 877-8-HOPE-NY or text HOPE-NY. In Connecticut, help is available for problem gambling. Call 888-789-7777 or visit ccpg.org. Please play responsibly on behalf of Boot Hill Casino and Resort. 21 plus. Age varies by jurisdiction. Void in Ontario. See dkng.co/football for eligibility terms and responsible gaming resources. Bonus bets expire 7 days after issuance. Eligibility and deposit restrictions apply.
So
Exactly.
I mean, I know you want to get in the Vegas shooting a little later, and I don't want to dump all of our info on it right now. So let's start from where you want to start, and then we'll get into. And then if we get back to Vegas shooting, then I'll say the couple things that I've noticed. But
Cool.
So where do you want to start? I know you have some stuff because the whole thing was you and I were going to get in some Ruby Ridge. So
Yeah, man.
let's start with
so-
the Omnibus Counterterrorism Act of 1995.
Well, that basically followed directly after the Oklahoma City bombing, right? Which
Which was
really
all
considered.
bullshit too.
Oh my God. I mean, it's outrageous that people have accepted that story. I mean, it's Timothy. I don't even need to get into that, to be honest. We could spend the whole rest of our time on Oklahoma City. But honestly, man, like the political climate at the time, right? It was just, I mean, we had the false flag of the blind sheik in the first World Trade Center attacks, like right around the corner, right? Which was 93. And then you had, and that to me was like trying to seed the Islamic terrorism narrative, like well before 9/11 was going to happen. And then you have Ted Kaczynski, MK Ultra Unabomber scenario playing off where he gets arrested in 95, right? So, I mean, that's at its height by this point. And then you have Waco. It's only 6 months after, and the same people who were embedded in the ATF and the FBI at Ruby Ridge were basically at Waco and carried out the siege. And so, I mean, Lon Horiuchi, the sniper, he was there too. He had confirmed kills
So
at Waco.
interesting when you say that, because that's the exact same story that happens when you look at the Michigan governor kidnapping, which
Oh
involved
my God.
12 to 13 not agents, but basically what's it called, John?
Informants.
Yeah, federal informants. Yeah.
Federal informants. That guy who ran that operation was moved to January 6th right after it.
Now that you say that, so shout out to Ken Silva. He's like a legit journalist who's done some really great work on a lot of this, a lot of like basically proving that PATCON never ended. You know what I mean? And pretty much the Charlottesville rally. It turns out the guy that was in the car that committed that crime, and a lot of the people there were federal informants, right? And just so that's PATCON all day, in my opinion. It's just a modernized form.
What's PATCON?
So, oh man. So PATCON it's Patriot Conspiracy is actually what the technical term was. But it was a covert FBI operation that didn't just secretly infiltrate right-wing domestic extremist
Oh
groups.
shit.
The real objective in PATCON had been to seed infiltrators and to incite these fringe groups to violence. They even created fake militia groups like the Veterans Aryan Movement, as well as running entrapment-based sting operations like Ruby Ridge with Randy Weaver, right?
Oh, not the
And
veterans Aryan movement. They're fake. You gotta be kidding me. Damn.
that
You can't trust
100%
anything.
PATCON, man. PATCON, right? And it's just insane.
I mean,
And-
they were
and-
like, what is the most evil? Like, let's take something that people love and let's put with something people hate
Yeah,
and make it
it's so
and
obvious.
make a peanut butter sandwich. The Patriots, Aryan. Oh my God. It's so
100%.
hilarious.
The Tom Brady Nazis. Like what?
Right.
No,
Dude,
no, not Tom
this
Brady.
was, in my opinion, this is why.
By the way,
it
that
became-
sounds like New England Patriots fan base, right? Patriot
It
Aryans.
really does.
Yeah.
Oh my God, bro. So the official narrative, though, it claims that PATCON began in 91, but would only last until like July 15th of 93, 6 months after Waco. But it's pretty clear that never ended. You know, it was directly overseen by Larry Potts, who was the assistant FBI director, who was later responsible for supervising the Ruby Ridge operation from FBI headquarters, and which led to accusations that Potts approved the order that, and this is a huge debate, of the rules of engagement were basically changed. And I'll get into that at some point. But I think first, honestly, what we should start with, because PATCON, I believe, is the true story of Ruby Ridge. I think they wanted to, one, they're always vying for funding. That's like, they even admitted this at one point in after the Waco siege, that they were just vying for funding from the new presidential administration who had taken office, and they were basically considering defunding the ATF, which I don't know how much I believe that, but apparently it was a consideration. And so, you know, top officials in the ATF, they were freaking out, right? And they said, we need a great press opportunity that will show the American public, one, how important and great we are as an agency, and two, that it'll show the new administration, right, and Congress that we need further funding. And so I'm telling you, they will murder you and your dog and your baby and your children at your house. They'll drive a tank through the front door, dude. If Waco didn't prove that, what won't? You know, and you hear like what they say, members of the police at Waco that carried out that siege, like they wanted it to be a mentality, like it was a part of their mentality that created that scenario of such tragedy. And they basically view it, there's 5,000 people to one agent of the law, right? And we basically need to instill fear into the people. Therefore, they will not break the law, right? And that was I forget the exact quote of the official at Waco that said this to a reporter, but it is shameful, 100% shameful. But it exposes their mentality. But first of all, I really do think like this was a plot to completely demonize the right-wing conservative Christian in America, right? And I think that if we look at, you know, the way that select group is viewed today in modern politics, it's basically created this terrible cultural divide where people are playing into this culture war when in reality it's just a class war, you know? And it's so I do think
100%.
that the main priority here was to completely demonize Randy Weaver and his ideology, right? And they wanted it to be a broad brush. They didn't want to specifically, you know, and that's why they were. And I heard that I read a story that they had apparently, the FBI had potentially, allegedly, they had paid for these fake protesters, like members of the Aryan nations, right? Like to come and behave like they were affiliated with Randy Weaver and they were going to protest and with Klan hoods on and yeah. And in reality, none of those people knew Randy. None of them ever were associated with him.
We have seen that so many times now. I mean, how many times do they have these people show up with real nice khaki pants on?
You're right.
With like
tiki torches.
Yeah, I mean,
come on, bro.
Not even that. That was that was beyond obvious. That was beyond. You know what's so interesting too was a lot of people when they showed that car starting to mow people over, they took a picture of the guy driving, and the guy driving did not look like the guy that they said did it.
Of course.
Right. And then they kind of picked, and then they found out who the guy really looked like, which was this military officer. And bro, that story left real quick. Good luck finding that picture. Good luck finding I mean, dude, straight up 1984. Now, I believe, and my instincts tell me that the government has such advanced software that they're actually affecting the Mandela effect. Like they're trying to get us to so not believe the wisdom of our experiences that they have a way to go through the internet and replace everything.
They're memory holing everything as we speak. I mean, if I try and do research on any of these subjects, I get so many 404 pages. I can't
internet,
find
dude.
articles.
That's
man.
the dead internet.
Yeah, 100%. And if you're not consistently like researching yourself, you're not going to even know that that's happening. And what does that do? Inherently, it changes all of history. I mean, in my opinion, if you only have a select narrative, right, that's going to maintain I mean, that's what it's about, right? It's so. By the way, what you had to say about the PATCON operation in Charlottesville, what we were just talking about. So apparently, did you hear that Representative Higgins claims that the FBI sent busloads of informants to storm Capitol Hill on January 6th?
Who said that?
Apparently, it's Representative Higgins. Okay. And this is Justin Clay Higgins. All right. And he's U.S. House of Representatives. That's who he is. Yeah. But he just claimed this with no information or evidence whatsoever. And so all I'm saying is it fits perfectly, but it also could be muddying the waters when it comes to a lot of people's like legitimate reporting on January 6th and feds being involved.
Yeah, he says Clay Higgins claims ghost buses brought FBI informants, and we know that's true because people are talking about they're busing people in right now.
That's what I'm saying.
You want to talk about memory hold? Try to bring video. Try to find stories about the LAPD cops who all 11 of them that committed suicide that saw Anthony Weiner's laptop. Try to find that story.
Good luck
people
with that.
Talk about it.
Hey, bring up Pizzagate and people act like you're crazy, right?
I just had a conversation with a good friend of mine that I love. And he was like, "You don't believe in that Pizzagate, do you?" I go,
"Oh my gosh.
Okay, if you want to have a conversation, we just talked about this on the last episode, but if you want to have a conversation about whether it's happening in a basement, even though everyone's convinced that the place doesn't have a basement, even though there's articles and interviews of him talking about his basement at the pizza shop.
And the one dude that went in only shot the computer with the hard drive in it that they wanted to destroy. But you know,
do you know that's how I realized that it was all real? Was when I studied that guy and I found out that his dad runs basically an organization along the lines, the name is along the lines of Habitat for Haitian Orphans. And it was funded by the Clinton Foundation. And that's when I knew it was all in. And that was the first time we found out that guess what? All the traffic cams didn't work that day.
Exactly. I heard that guy had also gotten into an accident. Yeah. And like killed somebody with his car. Yeah. And that could have been some factor that played a role in him being the guy that had to go in and shoot the computer. But either way, what an insane story that is, man. I mean, it is so sick.
But
And
we
you
get
read,
into it. We get into it about like okay, Pizzagate. They're molesting children in the basement. Okay, fine. You know what? That's why they call it Pizzagate. So you associate it with the pizza parlor, and then you can
Right.
dismiss it. But in reality, what they're talking about is a pedophile ring in
Right.
Washington D.C., and that's what I call Jeffrey Epstein's whole operation.
Oh yeah. And James Olifantis, just his Instagram alone, like what is that, dude? Can you explain to me why he has like this ancient Egyptian god of like basically the hero of pedophiles? Like it doesn't even make sense, man.
Yeah, yeah.
Wait,
You
if you
know?
guys have never ordered like 1,000 hot dogs?
Right.
For $50,000? No,
Yeah.
I've never
What
done
the
that.
hell,
I've
dude?
never spent $50,000 on
Uh-huh.
hot dogs and cheese pizza.
Right. And I mean, you know, Gordo from those conspiracy guys, they were talking about how it detailed like walnut sauce and all the different like what it represent, dude. That was disturbing as hell. Like, my God. I mean, at
Wait till you
some
find
point
out
I
what
will have to.
Germany did.
Oh God, yeah. Well, you know, that reminds me that there is a theory about Stephen Paddock and Mary Lou Danley, that girl he was supposedly dating that was in the Philippines at the
Yeah.
time,
Yeah.
but yet he used her identification to check into his rooms. Like, first of all, that's crazy. You know, like what hotel lets you do that? But I guess he's a high roller, so it's okay. And then it turns out that apparently she was on the FBI's payroll. And there's even evidence that puts her as like some revolutionary fighting against Marcos in the Philippines in the 60s and 70s, who then was given access by a CIA operative, was granted access to then come to the United States. And it's all a part of her like visa application stuff. It's like really weird, but there's evidence that proves that her entire like getting brought to the US was completely like authorized by a CIA operative who was in that area, right, running that area. And so then there was a theory that apparently claims that Silkway Airlines, right, which Stephen Paddock owned two planes, which were traced back to these defense contractors that were working for Obama,
100%, dude.
right? Yeah.
Like, it doesn't even make sense. The situation doesn't even make
No,
sense.
it
Why would a
doesn't.
guy that's going to shoot up a bunch of places have like a bunch of guns up there? You would only have
Right.
maybe a couple guns, maybe, and a ton of
Exactly.
ammo. You're not
Right.
bringing 1,000 guns unless you plan on selling all those guns. Everything
There's
about
I
him
know.
comes off as a gun runner, a black
Exactly.
market gun runner.
Yeah, and there's more evidence that proves that he was 100% even showed up. Like there's this Russian mobster that apparently works with the feds quite often and was helping as a part of Operation Fast and Furious, which was just like a part of the gun running operation, the ATF gun walking. It's a crazy. There's so much more than just Fast and Furious, but apparently he showed up to Chicago O'Hare International Airport the same time one of these planes flew in with a bunch of weapons on it, right? And he was supposed to be the guy there to accept the plane. So it's just outrageous that the amount of evidence that proves that this guy was for sure not some mentally disturbed mass shooter, right? And then apparently this guy, when you dig even deeper into the background of, I think he's a patsy a little bit in a certain way, even though he clearly is a part of the gun running
No, dude,
operation.
he was suing he was suing a hotel. There's a video of him fake falling and trying to sue the hotel. And when you do that gig,
Right.
you're meant to be a ghost.
Right. Yeah. I could see that. I mean, he could definitely have just worn out his usefulness, you know, as far as I'm concerned, become what's it called when you're hung out to dry? Anyways, there's a term for it, but
I think it's called hung out to dry.
yeah, basically. I think he was 100%.
So Johnny, have any of you guys been to Vegas lately?
Yeah.
So I don't know if this has happened in the hotel you were at, but when I went to Skankfest this year, every time I went into my hotel, I had to present my ID to them. Every
Your ID?
time.
Or
My
the card
ID.
or the room key
I had to present my ID
to
Wow.
get into the hotel
and my
or to your
room
room.
card. Yeah.
Never my ID. I've never had to present my ID. Just the
No,
room
you
card.
you only show your ID at when you check in, right?
Yeah,
I
I've
don't
never
know.
had to
go
do it.
in and show. I could have sworn I showed
What
my
hotel?
Was the
ID
last
and my
time-
credit card,
What
and
hotel?
they ran it.
Your
They
credit
go,
card?
ching, ching. My ID. They ran it through a thing to make sure it was valid. And
I would not be surprised.
What hotel was that, Sam?
what was it? It was it's
Was it Circa or whatever?
Yeah,
Circa.
Circa.
Huh, that's a new
And-
hotel. Yeah,
Oh, because Circa's 21 and over. Circa's the only club that's
Oh.
21 and over.
that makes sense. Yeah.
It's the only one that's 21 and over. So
Oh,
yeah,
really?
that makes sense. Yeah, it's the only
Well, I
one you
could've sworn
can't.
that
Kids,
every one of them downtown made us do that. Every one of those hotels. Because I also went to Gold Nugget. It happened there as well.
I
So
mean,
Well, they claimed that was a part of the plot, was that basically
that's what I'm
Michael
bringing up.
Chertoff. Yeah, Michael Chertoff, which was the second head of the Department of Homeland Security, and then him and before Sheldon Adelson died, right? They were like, apparently they had created these security measures for these casinos, and like they wanted it's basically TSA, but for
they want to
casinos.
install metal detectors. They want to install metal detectors.
100%, bro.
That's what it was.
That
It
was
was-
that 4chan post.
Mhm.
Yeah, dude. Yeah, exactly. And Michael Chertoff, for sure, he was the guy who helped cover up. He was a part of the Blind Sheik and the World Trade Center bombing, and was like a
What?
prosecutor. He was a federal prosecutor that helped cover that up, right? Which is totally crazy because I forget the name of the Blind Sheik, Omar Abdul Rahman or something like that, and he 100% was involved with the feds, and it was, I mean, the CIA created Al Qaeda, and we all know this, but
No,
they
honestly,
were-
we don't all know this because I'm on a podcast with a guy that doesn't know any of this. And we argue every day, and it's just insanity to me.
XG, don't take it from him, bro.
No, he's not talking.
No,
to
he's
me.
not talking about actually. He's talking
talking
about
about
Brian
Callen.
Callen.
Yeah, he's talking about
Oh,
Callen.
Brian Callen. Okay, all right.
Yeah, Brian
I
Callen
didn't know,
doesn't
yeah,
know
Brian
any of
Callen.
this right now.
But
So
Callen's like, his
he's
dad
the
was
best.
CIA,
I
right?
love him. He really
seems
is a
like the
wonderful
sweetest
guy.
guy of all
He
time.
is the sweetest guy.
Yeah,
He's
he
just
really
got bad
does.
info for a long time.
Yeah.
But let me just say this is
Mhm.
that all of that stuff is it's all inside info, it's all false flag shit. And I said this on my other show. I go, I really wonder how much violence would happen like on a high impact level
Right.
if there wasn't a hidden hand happening behind it.
Exactly. Yeah. And I think that's basically always the case.
Hey guys, real quick, I want to tell you about my boy James McMahon and Copy My Crypto. Let me tell you about Copy My Crypto. Listen, everybody, we've seen so many people making ridiculous money in crypto, but did you know it's easy for you to do the same? The Copy My Crypto membership site shows you the coins that YouTuber James McMahon personally holds and allows you to copy him, okay? It's like having a big brother who knows what he's doing. You don't need to know anything about crypto or how to invest. You simply do what he does. So let me tell you about James. He runs Crypto with James YouTube channel, which despite heavy censorship has over 26,000 subscribers. Since 2020, he's told his viewers to buy 26 crypto coins. Had you put in $100 into each one, it went on to be worth $120,000. Of the 26 coins, his top pick of the year, a coin called Phantom, went up 692 times from when he said. That one call retired a number of people, including guys in their 20s and 30s. Remember, this is all public knowledge. You can go to YouTube and verify for yourself. So if you'd like to join the 2,800 members who copy James, then stop what you're doing right now and head over to copymycrypto.com/TFH. That's copymycrypto.com/TFH. That's TFH. You'll not only find proof of everything I've said, but my listeners gain full access for just $1. Once again, that's copymycrypto.com/TFH. The recession is here, guys. You can suffer like everyone else or choose to thrive. James is a real deal. Go visit his site now.
The theory I wanted to throw out there right before we pivot back to Ruby Ridge for a minute. Besides owning those two planes that were connected to the defense contractors, and also Stephen Paddock he was a former IRS agent. He worked for this defense audit company that was merged into Lockheed Martin, right? Like that's who he was working for. And so it's just crazy to me that he had that many connections, but also he apparently his main company since 2004 is called Paradise Ranch, which was a joint venture with the Philippine Children's Fund of America, right? And that's a charity that provides a transitional home for American children. We fly from the Philippines. Now, strangely enough, there is also a Paradise Ranch in the Philippines, his partner's home country, right? Which is Marilu Danley, who is the FBI lady. And this Paradise Ranch is right next to a former U.S. Air Force base in the Clark Freeport Zone in Angeles City, a very well-known site of large-scale sex trafficking. So the obvious question is, did Paddock make his millions as an ex-CIA pilot running a human sex trafficking ring out of the Philippines? Like, dude, when I heard that, I just
Whoa.
okay. Well, the very least, we know the official narrative is bullshit, right? Like that's at the very least. And if that's true, right? And he definitely was a part of the Silkways Airlines, which was 100% flying out of the Philippines, right? I mean, that's a pedophile connection to Vegas as well, which is just, of course, right? Why would we be surprised at this point, And anyway, there were clearly multiple shooters. There were shootings at
It's
the
so
Hooters
obvious. It's so
crazy.
ridiculous. That old man can't break that glass. It's just all the SWAT that just sat back. The scanners which said there were multiple shooters all over Vegas that nobody's talking about.
Right.
The shots came from up top. People were getting shot from at
Dude,
a
that's
90,
what I'm
a
saying.
45
It's the-
angle. Yeah.
It's like
They
the
said it
guy
was-
on Twitter. I wish I could remember his Twitter handle. He brought it up. It's the same exact thing as Israel. And they moved that concert closer to the border. And then they just took out everybody and blamed it on Hamas. And everyone's going to lose their skull on me and say I'm talking crazy, but I'm not. I mean, over and over again, this story just becomes complete and utter bullshit. When you listen to you listen to hostages talking about the IDF shot everybody.
Oh, yeah.
Yeah,
And beyond that,
and let's not forget this was a country concert. They were trying to go after the conservatives. They were trying to scare them.
in Vegas? Yeah.
The one in
I
Vegas.
know, right?
This was this is not no LGBTQ getting shot up.
Exactly.
This is no club. This is a country club where your Second Amendment rights are really defended. And I remember looking at what are we going to do?
Brother, I read this article that claimed that apparently that was also could have potentially been a warning from Al-Talal to the Trump administration for his massive support for MBS, Mohammed bin Salman. And if you notice, of course, right after the Vegas shooting, the massive Saudi purge, right?
Yeah.
Yeah. And so
right after that, dude.
Right. And they
and
said
that guy you
Al-Talal
talked about that owns those floors is the one who basically funded Obama going through college.
That's what I'm saying. Yeah. And so oh my God, man. That's crazy, Sam. I didn't know that.
Yeah,
That's
he's the
insane.
guy who, and he's also the guy that handed that Saudi owns Citibank.
Yeah,
And
a major
Citibank-
shareholder in Twitter as well.
Well, they were,
Was. Yeah.
And he's the one that Citibank basically handed Biden a list for his cabinet, and every single one of them was picked.
Yep, I remember that. I try and explain that to members of my own family who
Why?
are so just blindly
Why?
partisan.
Why are you
know
doing
what I mean?
that, dude?
Yeah, no, it's been a huge mistake. I'll be honest, and I'm
I gave
basically
up.
that's where I'm at. I've done the exact same thing basically, but I had to. I'm pretty much I was lying to myself for way too long. That almost like the closer you are to someone, the less likely they are to actually take you
Which
seriously.
is the weirdest thing ever, right?
It
Like
really is.
that this thing where they believe somebody on the TV,
Yeah.
but they
Complete
don't
stranger.
believe you. Who like, I love my mother. I love her. There's I mean, outside of probably my daughters, there's very few people that I love more than my mother.
Right.
And she will not listen to me on anything. She, getting vaccinated, and then she just got boosted with a flu shot, and now
Oh my
she's
God,
had that
Travis
stint.
Kelce style.
Yeah.
Dude,
Then they
what
put the
hell, bro?
stints in, and
That's so sad, man.
it's super sad, dude, because you got to
Yeah.
take blood thinners now, and it's just like nobody listens to me. Nobody
Yeah.
listens to me. I try, but nobody listens to me. And so, yeah, you got.
I think a lot of us. I agree. I think a lot of us are going through a very similar experience, man. Like that's why I mentioned, like, COVID was so insane, and people aren't. I mean, it still is insane, and no, I mean, I just don't think it's just being so quickly swept under the rug because just all these different people who are saying that, you have to just forgive everyone. It was the chaos of the time, the chaos of the moment. And it's just so clear to me that all you have to just have minimal principles, not even very many principles that you've truly defined, right? To where you understand that you don't have a right to decide for another person, all of these things. And which is a part of why I've had to completely give up with trying to reach my family in any way, because basically, it's a complete waste of time. And I also believe that they're going to decide on their own anyway. So you can only do so much.
Yeah,
But
I mean, it's just the truth, dude.
Yeah.
It just sucks, and nobody wants to listen to me. I do have a lot of family members that do listen to me.
That's cool.
But at the end of the day, it's just like most of them think I'm a crazy person, which is
I'm there with
fine.
you, buddy.
I don't even care, but it just makes me sad because like everything becomes is everything conspiracy? Yeah, I mean everything is an intelligence operation. Like everything. There's everything. They're manipulating every moment of everything to control our reality.
Yep.
And what we
I
think
agree.
they want us. Like as much as I love Twitter and I love all the butts on Instagram, they're great, But that's just a not so much Instagram, but Twitter is even as good as is with Elon Musk. It's a fucking it is a trauma a trauma conductor distribution website. That's all it is. It just distributes trauma. And now with this new way of paying you money, now everybody's just posting like they're posting 10,000 times a day.
Dude,
Wait,
it
are you
blows my
talking about
mind.
them monetizing Twitter? Is that what you mean?
Yeah.
Well,
I couldn't handle it, man.
I have this YouTuber streamer Kit guy. He just came on my other podcast. He did a week straight streaming, and they gave him $1 a minute. Like he literally the only thing he had to
On
do
Twitter?
was on YouTube, on Kick or YouTube, one of those like new accounts, and all he had to do was turn the camera around when he was like taking a shit and in the shower. But he did it for a whole week straight. He didn't care everything, and to him it felt normal. And now he does it. He'll do
Wow.
24 hours like it's nothing now. Because a week to him is like, I'm like, whoa. Which I mean, we talk about how much Sam podcasts, but I couldn't imagine him going 24.
I would go nuts. I would lose my skull.
That's what I mean. I post like once a week with it when my episode comes out, or like if I feel for some reason like I actually naturally feel like I should respond, or I'm in the moment, like I don't know, I feel like I should post more a little bit, but at the same time, man, it is a complete waste of your time in a lot of ways unless you're using it to research, right? And beyond that, you just feel like you're going crazy because you're either put into an echo chamber, right? Placed into your echo chamber, and you're just hearing the same reinforcing narratives over and over again, or you're just arguing with people. Like, and what's hilarious is that this Ruby Ridge was like my 7th episode. I'm only on like 29 or something. This is my 30th, and it's the only one that I've gotten any hate for. And like, it was just some like 60-year-old white woman who was like, they're a bunch of Nazi white supremacists, okay? Just like a
Yeah. These it's like you can just tell who listens to fucking MSNBC and CNN, and it's like Malcolm X said, it's like, the media will get you like hating the victims and loving the oppressors.
Huh.
Yeah.
Yeah. It's funny though, the Ruby Ridge, even the mainstream narrative of Ruby Ridge is it's damning for the government. I can't imagine. I mean, how brainwashed do you have to be to think that even that was okay?
Austin, take us
Clearly,
from the
yeah.
beginning of it.
Okay.
Let's get into the beginning of Ruby Ridge.
Sounds good. All right, so Randy Weaver, right? He grew up in a small town in southwestern Iowa and graduated from high school around 1966. And in 1968, in October, when he was 20 years old, he joined the Army, and he eventually became a member of the elite special forces unit called the Green Berets, right? Very similar to Timothy McVeigh and Terry Nichols, which I did find a potential connection between Bo Gritz, who was the special forces commander of the Green Berets at the time, and actually trained Randy Weaver when he was in special forces. And he also knew Terry Nichols, which I thought was insane because Terry Nichols, forever had said, you get me in front of a legit grand jury, I'll blow open Oklahoma City. And dude, they're never going to let that happen. It's crazy. They like barred everyone from ever even visiting him. And like, it's an insane story. But anyway, so beyond that weird connection to the Green Berets, which I can never really get away from, he also he only was in the military for like 3 years, and then he gets an honorable discharge, and then he started dating Vicky in 1970, right? And that's when he's given the discharge. And then he, at the time, 3 years into his service, right, he decides that after he's discharged, he gets married to Vicky and they move to Cedar Falls, Iowa. And he had plans of enrolling at the University of Northern Iowa, claiming he wanted to research, he claimed his end goal was to become an FBI agent, which is like, bro, when you find out what happened to him at Ruby Ridge, like, what are the odds that he originally was a Green Beret, like such a part of the system, but yet you're also, I get it because I completely flip-flopped ideologically as well, like this from, a more of an education, but also just a more objective approach toward learning anything about politics, But anyway, so there were after he had supposedly claimed that he wanted to become an FBI agent, he never ended up going to Northern Iowa, the university. He ended up getting a job, like pretty well paying, at the John Deere tractor factory. And then they had their first child, Sarah, in 1976. And Vicky supposedly at that time took on the role of spiritual leader in the family. And by 1978, she allegedly read a book written by Hal Lindsey called The Late Great Planet Earth that basically interpreted the prophecies of the Old Testament and applied his interpretation to the events of current times, concluding that we were now in the end times, right? And apparently after she read this book, Vicky began having recurring dreams of living on a mountaintop and believed that the apocalypse was imminent. And in an attempt to escape what they viewed as a world corrupted, they fled to Idaho where they could legally homeschool their newborn son, Samuel. And that was another factor, was that where they were in Iowa, you couldn't legally homeschool your child. Which, what, are you serious? Like, as far as I'm concerned, I am ideologically aligned with Randy in that sense. He called all schools, all public schools, government schools, which that's how I view it. I mean, it's clear. It's exactly what they are.
You know,
Indoctrination
so weird, man.
centers.
My mother and my father were both teachers, and my dad didn't like the government. He wasn't a government guy. He wasn't like, he was anti like bureaucracy, and he just hated to play by the rules. So in that sense, he was very anti-establishment. But they loved educating kids, and I don't think all teachers are bad people. I think if you catch the wrong school, you're in trouble.
Oh God. I mean, I'll just my school, just my own firsthand experience. I went to Gravett High School, right? I grew up in Northwest Arkansas. Okay. Super rural area. I grew up on like a 35-acre farm. My mom was like a horse trainer. Like my dad was a truck driver, you know? And so I value that experience so much now. Like, it's crazy. I know growing up, all I wanted was to move to LA, you know, experience the big city. You know what I'm saying? It's what a lot of people imagine. And I also, who hasn't, if you grew up in America, our identities are basically completely attached to Hollywood, right? It's so weird, but everyone chooses who to worship, which celebrity they prefer, and then they all craft their identities after these famous people. And I've seen it in my own life just so much, right? Like, I just having the conversations with people that I know and love. It'll be like the only way they can relate to me is, what TV show do you watch, right? And what's the latest drama about some fucking celebrity that I could not care less about, right? It's just like at a certain point, I got so I had to unplug from Hollywood, man. I loved theater when I first found it, which is weird because I was like into athletics. But then I was partying a little bit, you know, and I couldn't, like, I got caught smoking weed in school and all this. And so I had to pivot from organized sports. Okay. And then just some girls like got me into theater, right? They were doing a musical and I could sing, right? So I grew up like singing and playing a little piano and guitar. And so anyway, it's just a crazy experience because growing up in that school, you know, like that school alone, okay, I just have to say, at least while I was there, one of the teachers who went to prison for being a pedophile, okay, like I remember I went into his word processing class one day, and me and my boy Michael, and he like puts his hand on my leg, and I'm like, dude, what are you doing, bro? You know? And then he just like plays it off because clearly I was like a confident young man, and like I wasn't into it. You know what I mean? But at the same time, like I was so ignorant at the time. I had no idea what actually happened until I was like granted hindsight and and became a little more aware of exactly. And then he gets arrested, and of course people find out, right? But we had another teacher while I was there he gets arrested for having sex with one of the female students, right? And he goes to jail. And I'll never forget that either. And so it's just like so much I've seen, like my own personal experience. And also, we had a female teacher who, once we graduated, had sex with one of my boys. And then we were living together in an apartment. And I'm just using this as an example because of how ridiculous I think public school is, truly. And I don't believe these are all teachers, but I lived in a small town, and this was supposed to be a good school. It's still considered a good school. And I truly didn't learn very much of anything while I was there. All that I did was try and get them to treat me less like a slave. You know what I mean? That's basically what it felt like. Knowing the whole history of the Prussian model, and the whole reason that it's like structured in the way with each hour you get a bell and you have to go to the next.
It's a factory and it's prison.
Exactly. It's an assembly line. And it's supposed to break us. I really believe it's supposed to break our spirits. It's supposed to drive the individuality out of us. And we're meant to embrace the collectivist nature. And I believe it basically boils down to just that. It's collectivism versus individualism. And you have to have an identity, but you have to construct it yourself. And so you can't just completely mold yourself after some person you saw in a movie, right? And then you wonder why you have no identity when you're 30 years old. Most people have had a child by that point. It's just completely insane. But I just deal with it on a daily basis, and
yeah. I mean, like I have a buddy of mine that I'm not going to say his name, but he just had an issue with his kid's school. His kid's teacher got a little too handsy with his wife. And then when he went to, she did some investigation into him and went to the teacher's Twitter, there's hardcore pornography on there and all that stuff. Now, let me just say something. I don't think teachers what teachers do in the privacy of their own home is their own thing, as long as they're not hurting anybody, right? So what I'm saying is, if a teacher wants to watch hardcore porn, they can watch hardcore porn, as long as they don't bring that to their job and stuff like that. You can't expect them to walk on water, right?
Exactly.
But when you're putting it on your social media, that is a presentation,
right?
And it's gone. It's I don't want that person near children. And I know his daughter's age. It's not not that much farther from my daughter's age.
Right.
And that is a sign, what you put out is this. And this is coming from a guy who's got a tinfoil hat podcast, which is conspiracies. I've done the Naughty Show where back in the day interviewed adult film stars. And I'm pretty honest with who I am and my strengths and my weaknesses, but I choose to be that person. But what you put on your timeline defines you.
That is very easy for a kid to find. If you're at home or whatever and you want to maybe email your teacher, you type in the name, Twitter comes up, you click the Twitter, now you see all the porn that your teacher's into.
Right, yeah. Oh my God.
Yeah, it's done.
Definitely.
It's just dumb. It's just ridiculous. So back to Ruby Ridge real quick. He wanted to have that. He wanted to have homeschooling. Idaho didn't allow that. That becomes an issue.
Yep. And so reportedly after the birth of their son, the Weavers started selling all their stuff and even they even visited the Amish and tried to learn to live without electricity and that was all right before they moved to Boundary County, Idaho and purchased 20 acres of land, right? And so by that time, it was pretty well established, that Randy and Vicky were affiliated with the Christian identity movement, which it definitely holds some off-centered beliefs, but I mean, it's interesting because they believe in a Zionist occupied government and all of this, and that they're the true descendants of the tribes of Israel. and are basically the modern nationalites of Europe, and that today's Jews are imposters, and that Yahweh has fierce punishment planned for sinful America and its Babylonian occupational government, and it like claims to live by Old Testament laws and to be the true heirs of Israel. And so many of them are separatists, right? They'll be white separatists, and that was a belief, like, but they would be consistently labeled as white supremacists, which they weren't like actively. Nothing I could find shows that they were actively treating anyone in any negative way because of their race or ethnicity or whatever. I couldn't find any evidence of that at all. All I could find was that they were white separatists and that they just wanted to have the right to live amongst their own race if they so chose, which, say whatever you want about that. I mean, we have to at least allow people, right, to have their own belief system, as long as they're not in any way breaching a couple of core principles like the non-aggression principle, or they're stealing your property. I mean, then I think everything will be okay, most of the time, if you just leave them alone, And so
it is interesting. It is interesting because, there's so many people that have this kind of, I mean, you could, if you take a look at what's going on in these campuses, you have, you have these people who basically, are like, Africans only. They had like on Berkeley, right. They had African only graduation.
Oh, yeah.
I mean, it's just
it's okay ridiculous. To be racist if you're a minority in America, right?
Well, my whole thing is like
which I don't understand.
The notion. Listen, I know this statement drives people crazy, but I love the diversity of Los Angeles. As crazy as the politics are, I really enjoy. I love that I can get any kind of food, any kind of restaurant, any ethnic group restaurant. I just love it. I do love it. I love the diversity of it. Okay.
I do too, man.
But I also know that like humans are mammals and they run in packs. Mm-hmm. And we're the first time mammals tried to make different packs live together in different ways. And it's going to be clunky, and there's going to be moments of weirdness, especially when you have an elite predator class getting us all to fight with each other. So exactly. Like, as open-minded as LA is, which everyone thinks it is, I'm going to be honest with you. It is the most segregated city I've ever been in.
Oh, yeah.
If you look at LA, the blacks live here, the Mexicans live here, the Jews live here, the Armenians live here, the gays live here. They just all naturally just come together. It's just the way it is, man.
You have there's little Tokyo, little Armenia, there's all these little everythings, and
100%.
Yeah, it's basically
it's almost like people enjoy hanging out with others who share the same culture. You know what I mean?
What a concept, like Johnny.
Yeah. Wow, Johnny.
But this notion that like what the only ones who aren't allowed to want to do that are white people. I mean,
because we don't have a culture, Sam. That's why.
Maybe you're just not allowed to announce it. You just do it quietly. I don't know, but it's just interesting.
Then it's a KKK meeting.
I mean, because you go to let's say San Francisco, which is supposed to be the super woke city. There's places in San Francisco white people cannot get an apartment, or black people, or anybody who's not Chinese can't live there.
Mm-hmm. Well, I mean, I believe society is basically self-organizing, and that, yes, most everyone's self-interested, right? Most everyone is inevitably a little selfish, right? They're all going to look out for their own interests to a certain degree, but most people on average, they don't seem to have evil intentions, right? Like, and that's like something I try and consider more than anything is, what are your intentions? More than, because I've seen people who are so just down the partisan divide, they can't see straight, right? But they're clearly not bad people. You know, they've just been entirely misled by propaganda, deceived into these terrible ideas that are only going to harm them and everyone else, right? And so it's just, anyway, it's a sad situation that we're in. I'll tell you that much. But
well, I think it is sad, but it's also, I don't think it's as, it's interesting, dude. It's interesting, man.
I agree with you though. The diversity is not, it's not a negative.
Dude, I've traveled the world where it's a what's it called?
Homogenetic, yeah.
Well,
what do you mean? Where like everybody's one thing, or it's diverse?
Yeah. What's it called?
Homogenic would be one thing.
Homogenic, and it's boring as fuck. It's
right.
boring. It's really boring.
I'm sure.
Like I know people like the problem isn't diversity. The problem is, and it always will be, anything weaponized.
Exactly.
Right? Weaponized diversity sucks because you're forcing stuff that isn't happening naturally. What it is people want equal opportunity, which I think again gets into this common sense thing. It's just common sense.
That's impossible though. Like, it's equality of outcome, which is the ridiculous notion, right? And so it's like, no, I am never going to be like, I never deserve to be on the same basketball court as LeBron James, right? Like, that's just, no, I don't, you know, like I would love to be. It's completely delusional to imagine that I deserve to be on the court with LeBron James, just, you know, because I deserve that opportunity. That's what a lot of people, they have been led to believe, right? That we all deserve these equal opportunities, but that's just impossible. It's not even coherent to imagine that as a possibility, right? But with the elite class divide that has been so wrought within our just honestly the entire, I mean, not just America, right? Like, it's clearly we have elites running the world, right? A committee of 300, in my opinion. If you've ever read that book, it is so amazing, man. And they like go down the line explaining how each president was chosen by this elite sect of individuals out of the city of London and all of this, and Chatham House, and anyway, let's get back to Ruby Ridge though.
No, I get it, dude. I totally get it. Let's get back into Ruby Ridge.
For sure. So after they bought the cabin, which was only like 40 miles from the Canadian border, Kevin Harris, by the way, he was a close friend of Randy, and he was known to Randy called him his second son, right? He was known to stay with them for extended periods of time. And based on like a Department of Justice report from 1994, June 10th, in regard to the Ruby Ridge Task Force, in 1984, Randy Weaver and his neighbor, Terry Kinnison, had a dispute over a $3,000 land deal. And Randy's neighbor, Kinnison, he lost the ensuing lawsuit and was ordered to pay Weaver an additional $2,100 in court costs and damages. Now, this is weird because this dispute between Randy and his neighbor, it like escalates more than you would ever imagine. Like, it's so insane to imagine somebody being this upset about like his property boundaries. I would imagine was the circumstance. But so Kinnison, he gets so pissed that he has to pay Randy in court costs and damages and all of this, that he decides to write letters to the FBI, the Secret Service, and the county sheriff, where he alleged that Weaver had threatened to kill Pope John Paul II, President Ronald Reagan, and Idaho Governor John V. Evans, right? Now, this was the first time that Randy would be brought onto the FBI's radar. And in January of 85, the FBI and the Secret Service launched an investigation into allegations that Weaver had made these threats against Reagan and other government law enforcement officials. And so in the letters, the Terry Kinnison, the neighbor, he decided to tell the Secret Service that Weaver was a member of Aryan nations, right? And that he had a large weapons cache at his residence. And on February 12th in 1985, 2 FBI agents, 2 Secret Service agents, and the county sheriff, plus the chief investigator, interviewed Vicky and Randy, accusing him of being a member of Aryan Nations due to the fact that during their month-long investigation, they had witnessed him associating with a man by the name of Frank Kumnick, who was known to associate with members of the Aryan Nations, which is just ridiculous. Hey, dude, you've hung out with that one guy, and he has some friends that are associated with the Aryan Nations, so therefore you're a Nazi, you know? And so Weaver was pissed, like apparently in this interview, like he got mad at the investigators, and he said that neither him or Kumnick were members of the Aryan Nations, and described Kumnick as associated with a group called the Covenant, Sword, and Arm of the Lord. And he outright denied the allegations, and the government filed no charges, right? But on February 28th, Randy and Vicky filed an affidavit with the county courthouse alleging that their personal enemies were plotting to provoke the FBI into attacking and killing the Weaver family.
What?
Like, that alone, I'm like, dude, what is happening here? Like, could you imagine your neighbor being so pissed at you that he just sends all these threatening letters to all these government officials? Like, that is just so crazy in the first place. But
that is so nuts.
Them literally filing an affidavit that said that blew my mind, right? And then reportedly by May 6th, the Weavers sent President Reagan a letter, and they claimed that their enemies may have sent Reagan a threatening letter under a forged signature, right? And so no evidence of any of these letters has ever surfaced. But in 1992, the prosecutor cited the 1985 letter as an overt act of the Weaver family conspiracy against the federal government, right? And the Bureau of Alcohol, Tobacco, and Firearms first became aware of Weaver in 86 when he was introduced to an ATF informant at a meeting of the Aryan Nations. Okay, but this is weird, okay, because this whole situation that sounds bad. And then I looked into it, and it turns out that Weaver was invited by that Frank Kumnick, who they had initially been targeting in the investigation. And apparently, during his first and only appearance at this meeting, right, which it was kind of like an Elohim City situation, which led to the Oklahoma City, where Tim McVeigh was apparently going to that right outside of Oklahoma to that compound or whatever that was literally just a bunch of government informants, like, basically, you know, which is insane. But it's very similar to that, because guess what? At this meeting place, the one and only time that Weaver went was because his buddy had invited him to go. And when they went, guess who was there? A bunch of ATF informants and FBI informants, right? And they're all infiltrating the meeting. And so during that first and only appearance, Randy was introduced to Gus Magasono, all right? And that's an alias for Kenneth Fadley, who was a paid undercover BATF informant in the Aryan Nations, and introduced himself to Frank Kumnick as a weapons dealer, right? And so Kumnick, who was the original target of the ATF investigation, subsequently introduced him to Randy, which led to them exchanging contact information. And Randy and Gus, the confidential informant, seemingly became friends over the course of 3 years and met several times between the years 86 and 89. And Randy thought they were friends. Like, he started trusting this guy, and he had only met him at this one meeting, and then both of them never apparently went back, according to all the evidence. And in October of 89, Magasono, this is where they start the entrapment operation, basically. Because so I believe they had been told to target Frank Kumnick in order to flip him as an FBI informant or an ATF informant. And so I think that he ended up just trying to flip Randy as well, if not instead, right? And they got pissed because Randy apparently he asked Randy if he could acquire a minigun. Okay. So first I would be like, hey man, like I'm a little skeptical of this dude now. Like he's asking you for a minigun. You know what I mean? And then he apparently Randy even laughed, which I thought was hilarious, which I had read that Randy's reaction was to laugh at that. And then he said no to the FBI or to the ATF informant, who then proceeded to ask him if he was willing to sell him 2 shotguns with the barrels sawed off, even showing Randy where to cut after Randy had initially began the cut at the legal limit.
Something you could easily do. I mean, that's immediately suspicious because that's something anybody can do is saw off a shotgun. It's like,
no shit, man. That's crazy. I mean, you could just do it yourself and then claim that Randy did this and sold it to you.
We live in crazy times.
Don't we?
We just live in crazy times.
We really do, brother. But so when he asked him that, it just so happened that Randy had 2 shotguns with him, right? This is the story. And so Randy was apparently he was strapped for cash is the story. And he inevitably said, all right, and sold him 2 sawed-off shotguns for $300. And in November of 89, only 1 month after the transaction, this is weird as hell because it would like consider this. Magasono was the ATF informant, right? He's the one who's trying to flip Randy. But in November, less than a month after the transaction with the sawed-off shotguns with the ATF informant, he's approached by an FBI informant, not ATF, an FBI informant. And this dude decides to tell him, he tips him off. And he tells him that the friend he sold the shotguns to was a BATF informant. I just like, to me, why is the FBI informant ratting out the ATF informant? That was weird to me. You know, I didn't understand why that would even be a part of the story. And
maybe that's a way to get his trust so they could take it over.
It's possible.
Be like, hey, dude, this other agency is fucking.
Yeah, I mean, we know, at least if we believe what's been reported, that none of them play nice with each other. They all hate each other and have
exactly, man,
rivalries.
For sure. But I'm like, that racked my brain. I could not understand why that would happen or that would be the case. But so 8 months after this, a couple of BATF agents approached Weaver and asked him to serve as an informant within the Aryan nations. They then told him they didn't have a warrant, but they did have incriminating conversations on tape between him and Gus. And so then they threatened him with an arrest and confiscation of his truck or house if he didn't cooperate. And Randy, this made me like him, like on a personal level. But later, I liked him even more because of what he said to them when they're dragging out his wife's body. Spoiler alert, you know. But anyway, so Randy replied, "Fuck off." And so then they asked him again, and he repeated that line, which I admire that. Yeah. So anyway, in December 1990, Randy was indicted for manufacturing, possessing, and selling illegal firearms, which the difference between legal and illegal in this case was about 1/4 of an inch of a barrel per gun and a $200 tax stamp, right? And so on January 17th, 91, 2 BATF agents posing as a couple having engine trouble with a pickup truck hauling a camper stopped on the 1-lane bridge leading to the Weaver property. Randy and Vicky, dude, this pissed me off because I'm like, could you imagine? Okay, these people are monsters. They're terrible. Randy and Vicky pull over to help these people. Okay? That's just insane to me. And then Randy looked under the hood and a male agent stuck a .45 caliber pistol to the back of his neck and announced he was under arrest. Other law enforcement agents piled out of the camper. Vicky Weaver was thrown face down into the snow and mud, and Randy was taken into custody and later released on a $10,000 bond. The trial, this is where it gets insane because this became the pretext, right? This was like setting the stage for how they would escalate this to such a degree, man. So the trial was originally set for February 19th, 91. And then it was changed to February 20th for the convenience of the BATF. But probation officer Carl Richens sent Weaver a letter dated February 7th, instructing him to appear on March 20th. Although Assistant U.S. Attorney Ron Howen, who later acted as prosecutor, he knew Weaver had been sent an erroneous notification, and he appeared before the grand jury on March 14th, 6 days before the date Richens gave Weaver, and he got an indictment for failure to appear on February 20th, even though that was the wrong date sent to Weaver.
Oh, yep, that's it. I
It's just
remember that
insane.
they gave him the wrong date.
Yeah, so they gave him a month before, and he didn't. Or they gave him a month after for March 20th, and it was truly set on February 20th. And so when he didn't show, they didn't wait till March 20th, which to see if he would show for that, which is the actual date he was given. They instead, 6 days before March 20th, decided they were going to give to have an file for an indictment, basically, which they did get on a failure to appear. And so on February 26th, a reporter telephoned the U.S. Probation Office and asked whether the reason that Weaver did not show in court on February 20th was that the letter sent to him by Richens and had the incorrect date, right? And upon finding a copy of the letter, the chief probation officer, Terrence Hummel, contacted Judge Ryan's clerk and informed them of the incorrect date in the letter. Hummel also contacted the U.S. Marshals Service and Weaver's attorney, informing them of the error, but the judge, however, refused to withdraw the bench warrant, setting the stage, right? So that's when, in February 91, the United States Marshals Service developed a threat source profile on Weaver, and agents' failure to integrate new information into that profile was criticized in a 95 report by a subcommittee of the Senate Judiciary Committee, which they said, right, the subcommittee is concerned that as marshals investigating the Weaver case learned facts that contradicted information they previously had been provided, they did not adequately integrate their updated knowledge into their overall assessment of who Randy Weaver was or what threat he might pose. So, from the beginning, they were already... I think that somebody had a hard-on for Randy. And they 100%, somebody was either pissed that they couldn't get this guy to flip, and they just wanted to infiltrate this group. But at a certain point, they were looking for a press op. That's what happened. And so if the marshals made any attempt to assess the credibility of the various people who gave them information about Weaver, they never recorded their assessments. All right. And rather than maintaining the threat source profile as a living document, the marshals added new reports to an ever-expanding file, and their overall assessment never really changed. And these problems apparently rendered it difficult for other law enforcement officials to assess the Weaver case accurately without the benefit of first-hand briefings from persons who had continuing involvement with him. Right? And in a memorandum by Deputy Attorney General Jamie Gorelick, this was dated April 5th in 95. They cited the U.S. Senate Subcommittee on Terrorism Ruby Ridge report from 96, which opined that the assumptions of federal and some state and local law enforcement personnel about Weaver, that he was a Green Beret, that he would shoot on sight anyone who attempted to arrest him, and that he had collected certain types of arms, that he had booby-trapped and tunneled his property, right? Like, that's all the things that they're telling investigators at the time, is that he had literally, he's an ex-Green Beret. This is his profile, that he would shoot anyone on sight who attempted to arrest him. And he had collected certain types of arms, booby-trapping his freaking property. And they acted like he had tunnels all over the place. And so a plan was for sure implemented at the Marshal Service headquarters in Arlington. And a deputy named Art Roderick came up with a long-term 3-part campaign he called Operation Northern Exposure, which is when things get out of hand. And that's the first phase, which was to gather more intelligence. The second was to conduct intensive surveillance, rigging up the entire tree line. And I even found out that apparently after they had rigged up the whole tree line of the property with all these surveillance equipment from the FBI and ATF and Marshal Service, like one of so Sammy and Sarah, who were the kids, the 14-year-old little boy, and then the 16-year-old, I think she was 17 by the time it happened, Sarah. And they were like best friends. They did everything together. And they would always go out on the property with Sammy's little mini 14 and they would hunt game, right? And apparently they were out playing in the woods and they stumbled on one of these cameras, right? And this is like right after Randy had gotten arrested. Randy had they tried to make him flip, all of this. And so he was realizing that things were a little more serious by that point, right? Because like his kid walked up and stumbled onto a freaking camera, right, in the woods on your property, and then runs home to their dad and tells them, look what we just found. Like, imagine the paranoia at that point, you know?
That's insane. We're back. Sorry, had to use the bathroom. So where were we? The kid just discovered the camera.
Right. Yep. So I just want to get back to the memorandum by Deputy Attorney General Jamie Corlick, because that was a huge problem. Like that threat source profile, you know, like if every single investigator or person responding to that scene, right, truly believed that character source profile, I mean, that's crazy, man. I mean, they're saying that he would shoot anyone on sight, right? So that effectively means that they believed they should change the rules of engagement, you know? But anyway, that was the threat source profile circulating at the time internally, which to me was entirely exaggerated and just false, right? But
well, the other thing is too, like if you think somebody, okay, they got their property booby trapped, they have the equivalent to a small militia, you know, in armaments. Maybe we arrest them while they're out in town getting groceries. Maybe we don't go to their compound and engage in, you know, a military operation. You know, I mean,
right?
Any government agency with any sense would have done that. Sure. Which, I mean, sense, you know, is a rare thing in government agencies. Right. But I mean, obviously, you don't go to if you really believe that, you don't show up there and you know, try to storm the castle. I mean, it's insanity.
Exactly. I mean, one of the investigators, even like, I believe is actually one of the negotiators that were negotiating for the FBI and the ATF at the time. And they 100% asked the question, why can't I just go up there and talk to him? Right? Which was never apparently on the table, which to me is just,
because they need a high impact event.
Exactly. So they were attempting to escalate, in my opinion. But so after the plan they had, the U.S. Marshals had set, you know, they had basically hatched this plan at the headquarters in Arlington, and they had like a long-term 3-part campaign, and that's why they went away for a few months after rigging up the property with surveillance cameras, right? And so then that's when Geraldo Rivera apparently flew over the property, which is totally insane. Like, why would that even happen? And when that happened, reports came out that apparently Randy had shot people at the property, had shot at the helicopter, which is when Randy decided to call into a local news channel, like a local radio and news radio. And he 100% rejects that entire scenario and claims that never happened. And then, like I said earlier, the helicopter pilot also said that Geraldo had lied and that never occurred. And so we know that didn't happen. But I just thought it was crazy.
Mockingbird, Geraldo's just a bag of dicks.
Exactly. But imagine being Randy and you see these reports that you fired on a helicopter, dude.
It's
like a media
absolutely
helicopter.
Ridiculous.
Yeah. And so he freaked out and called a local news channel and then completely denied all of that, which I thought was interesting. But anyway, so it was Geraldo's Now It Can Be Told TV show, right? And Richard Weiss was the helicopter pilot who completely denied it. And that didn't stop the U.S. Marshal Service and Wayne Duke Smith, right, which was an FBI's Richard Rogers, right? So that was the Marshal Service guy, was Wayne Duke Smith, and FBI's Richard Rogers are the guys who allegedly used the shooting to justify the new issuing of the new rules of engagement, right? And so that, to me, is such a huge part of the story, because that's immediately when it became shoot on sight. So the rules of engagement, different to FBI standard deadly force policy, several snipers testified later that they considered those orders to be a green light to shoot on sight. And so, according to the document presented in court, these special rules of engagement were drafted and approved by the FBI and the United States Marshals Service on Saturday, August 22nd, for use on Ruby Ridge. The new rules of engagement stated, if any adult in the area around the cabin is observed with a weapon after the surrender announcement had been made, deadly force could and should be used to neutralize the individual. If any adult male is observed with a weapon prior to the announcement, deadly force can and should be employed if the shot can be taken without endangering any children. If compromised by any dog, the dog can be taken out.
Jeez.
Any subjects.
Kill the dog too.
Right. Any subjects other than Randy Weaver, Vicky Weaver, and Kevin Harris presenting threat of death or grievous bodily harm, FBI rules of deadly force apply. So deadly force can be utilized to prevent the death or grievous bodily injury to oneself or that of another. And that was the deadly force policy that they decided to use, the new rules of engagement. And that's literally the document they presented in court, which is crazy to me. So now clearly it escalated into an 11-day siege, but which resulted in the murder of 3 people and the family dog Stryker. And it began on August 21st in 92, when 6 U.S. Marshals outfitted in military camis, night vision goggles, and brandishing M16 assault rifles were sent to scout for a suitable area away from the cabin where they would be able to apprehend and arrest Weaver. Official reports from 94 state that 3 of the deputy U.S. Marshals would form a reconnaissance team consisting of Art Roderick, Larry Cooper, and William Bill Deegan, while 3 others would form an observation post team on the north ridge from the cabin, right? So multiple reports have Roderick throwing 2 rocks at the Weaver cabin in order to test the dog's reaction, which in turn provoked the dog, right? and Weaver's friend Kevin Harris and Weaver's 14-year-old son Sammy followed after the dog in hopes that the dog had noticed a game animal, and since the cabin was out of meat, which that's literally how they ate. They were consistently just hunting for their food. And the recon team had reportedly retreated through the woods to a Y junction in the trails about 500 yards west of the cabin in an effort to remain out of sight. With Sammy and Kevin, they followed Stryker on foot through the woods, while Randy, also on foot, took a separate logging trail. Vicky, Sarah, and Rachel, which Sarah is like the 17-year-old daughter, and then Rachel's 10 years old, and baby Elisheba is like 10 months old. She's just a baby, right? And they just stayed at the cabin. Clearly, they're not going to go out and follow Stryker. But so anyway, Randy encountered the marshals at the Y. Roderick claimed to have yelled. Roderick, remember, he's a deputy U.S. Marshal. He claimed to have yelled, "Back off, U.S. Marshal," upon sighting Weaver. And Cooper said he had shouted, "Stop, U.S. Marshal," right? But Kevin later claimed, and he claimed this in court as well, and it seemed way more legitimate, that none of them actually disclosed that they were U.S. Marshals before the shooting started. And so it was a huge debate in court, who shot first, and that it was a consistent narrative, right? Fed to the public, these people shot first. It was a lot like Waco. Anyway, so by their account, okay, and this was summarized in U.S. Senate subcommittee report on Ruby Ridge. But by their account, Sammy and Stryker came out of the woods about a minute later when the marshal's position was revealed by the dog Stryker, and which, by the way, the story goes that Stryker runs up to the U.S. Marshals and playfully circles them, and then circles the other one, and then starts to go back to Sammy and Kevin, and they shoot the dog in the back. They shoot the dog while it's running back to 14-year-old Sammy. Right? I'm just like, consider. I mean, like I said, I grew up in Arkansas, right? I grew up on the farm. Like, I had my dog, and we were out on the farm like this. And dude, if anybody, I don't care who you are, if you shot my dog in front of me and I had a gun on me, I'm gonna shoot you probably. Like
John Wick, you got to John Wick him. You got to John Wick him.
I'm gonna seriously consider it, bro. Like, I mean, I wouldn't be surprised, especially you're just a temperamental 14-year-old kid, man. I mean, I was out of control already. So, but plus they're on your property. I mean, consider that they're on your property, killing your dog in front of you. But anyway, so Roderick shot the dog, and Sammy saw it, right? And he reportedly yelled to the marshals, "You've killed my dog, you son of a bitch!" And then he shot in their direction, right? And do you know there's like a movie, like almost like a Lifetime movie with like Dennis Quaid, and like Laura Dern plays Vicky and Kirsten Dunst plays Sarah, and like it's such a cartoon. But anyway, so after that,
crazy times, dude.
It is crazy times, man. But so Cooper then shot towards Sammy and shot at Kevin as well, who both sought cover. And Harris, once finding cover behind a tree stump, returned fire with one unaimed shot, which eventually killed William Francis Bill Deegan, who, by the way, conveniently is who they claim is the one who fired the shots that killed Sammy while he was running away, which is very, who knows? The ballistics kind of tell a different story, but that was never much of a concern. So anyway, it turns out that while Sammy's running away, retreating up the hill, he was shot in the back by Francis Bill Deegan and killed. No, I'm sorry. Bill Deegan was killed by Kevin Harris. Okay. And then Sammy was killed by Marshall Cooper. Okay. And so it's an insane story. And then Kevin Harris would later dispute certain details of the U.S. Marshal's account, including the fact that only after the shooting had started and Deputy U.S. Marshal Cooper was forced to take cover did he identify himself as a U.S. Marshal. So that was a huge part. And at this point, one of theirs died, right? So they got blood in the game. You have one of your own agents. That's your homie. That's how they looked at it. In my opinion, it's like they killed one of ours, which has to be, you're going to cause a legit reaction with guys like that. Like this, it's very similar, to Waco, so much so. But now it was serious, right? So, if not already, but a few hours later, Marshal Dave Hunt, okay, he goes over to the neighbor who had originally written all those letters about Randy, killing the Pope and assassinating the president. Well, he just so happened to let the marshals in. Yeah, use my phone. You know what I mean? And so they all call and report that an agent had been killed, right? Stating that federal agents were trapped on a ridge in Naples taking heavy fire. That was the report, right? So, like much of the early story of Ruby Ridge, it was far less than true. That was just a falsehood. That was not the case. And so that triggered one of the largest law enforcement operations ever to occur in Idaho. Wow. And so in the Justice Department report on the Ruby Ridge Task Force, shortly after the gunfight, the FBI was notified of the killing of a U.S. Marshal, and the Marshal Service Special Operations Group was alerted to deploy. Cecil Andrews, governor of Idaho, declared a state of emergency, allowing for the use of the Idaho National Guard Armory at Bonners Ferry and to use armored personnel personnel carriers, APCs, better known as tanks without a turret, right? And an elite tactical unit called the Hostage Rescue Team was sent from the FBI Academy in Quantico, Virginia. And Eugene Glenn worked at the FBI office in Salt Lake City and was appointed site commander, also known as special agent in charge, responsible for all active individuals from the FBI, ATF, and U.S. Marshal Service. And on August 22nd, the FBI, under the impression they were entering an active, unprovoked firefight against U.S. Marshals, arrived on Ruby Ridge. And hundreds of law enforcement officers, have you ever seen pictures of the scene? Like where they have like, they established a camp. They had like carved out all these paths for the tanks to go through. It was a war zone. That's what it looked like. They had a massive helicopter that was just sitting out there. And so that was how they were treating this. And hundreds of law enforcement officers were present, right? And they were under the unusual orders to shoot any armed adult on sight. FBI snipers set up a perimeter, hoping to force Weaver to negotiate. That was the apparent strategy, right?
I mean, look at that right there. That looks like it's all military.
That's what I mean. Yeah, exactly.
Unbelievable, dude.
Isn't that insane?
Unbelievable.
Wow. That's just ridiculous. Oh my gosh. Yeah, it is. When I looked at the pictures myself, and it's outrageous. I can't believe that they would stage that much. Like the camp looked like it was a war zone headquarters. And you know what they called the camp? Camp Vicky. Right? Yeah. And it's really weird because Bo Gritz talks about this later. And I'll get into that because after they set up the snipers on the perimeter, it's just such a sad story too. But so apparently after heading to the nearby shed, okay, where they brought Sammy's body, because after Sammy was shot, okay, Vicky and Randy, they decided to use the opportunity for the retreating agents to run and grab the body of Sammy. And so they went and grabbed Sammy's body, took him back up and put him in like a small shack that they called a guest house. But it was, their house was a shack. And then this was just like, it looked like an outhouse basically. But anyway, so Randy went to look at the body, right? And he just thought, I want to go see my son one last time. And so Harris went with him, as well as the 16-year-old daughter, Sarah. And that's when the FBI sniper, Lon Horiuchi, decides to fire shots, right? And before the negotiators arrived at the cabin, okay? So they're not even there negotiating anything. And the FBI sniper, Lon Horiuchi, from a position over 200 yards north of the Weber cabin, shot and wounded Randy in the back while he was lifting the latch on the shed to visit the body of his dead son. Now, the sniper would later claim that he thought the men were about to fire on a helicopter, which to me just fit perfectly in the narrative with the Geraldo Rivera helicopter story, right? So Weaver was hit. The bullet had entered his back and exited his right armpit, and he, Sarah, and Harris headed back to the apparent safety of the house. As the men approached the house, Vicky stood behind the front door, holding her infant daughter. Horiuchi fired a second time. This time, he hits Vicky in the face and kills her instantly.
Wow.
So the bullet also seriously injured Harris, who was standing behind Vicky. And Horiuchi later said he didn't know Vicky was in the doorway and had his sights on Harris. I don't believe that for a second. So, but I'll get into that in a second. Chaos ensued as Harris, Weaver, and his surviving family took cover in the cabin. And both Harris and Weaver wounded, Vicky and Sammy dead. The situation was grim. It seemed to confirm the Weavers' darkest suspicions about the federal government and the imminent apocalypse. Yet Weaver wouldn't give up, right? So outside the cabin, hundreds of protesters arrived to oppose the government's actions and grew increasingly agitated when they learned of the deaths of Sammy and Vicky. And they had all these signs like "Fed shot first," and "Your house will be next," right? Like it was like super sad, to be honest. But And then also they were apparently all the agents were like, we can't go up there because we don't know how many people are in the house. And all the neighbors except for, you know, what's his name, who would sit the letters, they're all like, no, we know how many people are in there. We know exactly who's in the house. They're our neighbors, you know. It's and the feds just completely disregarded any of that. But so at that point, in order to really drive home like the injustice, it's crazy what Sarah told to PBS, like what the 17-year-old girl told to PBS. She said
Oh,
this
she survived
personally.
and she's still alive?
Sarah's okay. Yeah, Sarah's okay. It was just Sammy and Vicky that were murdered. And this is so nuts because Sarah, she told PBS, and Randy and Sarah, after the fact, they wrote a book about their firsthand experience. It's really nuts.
Randy's alive.
Bro, it's a weird story. They just murdered his baby, or they murdered his only son. And then they murdered his wife.
And his dog.
Yeah, and the dog.
And
yeah.
his dog. Yeah.
And he's still alive?
And he's still alive. But listen to how this all ends. So first let's listen to Sarah's personal account because it's so sad. But so she tells PBS, the morning after Sammy had been killed was rainy, cold, and quiet until the dogs started barking again because they had another dog, which didn't die. But anyway, Sarah's dad and Kevin headed out to see if someone was coming up the drive to finally talk about what had happened. But when they got out there, the dogs had stopped and all was quiet again, or so it seemed to Sarah. She had followed the boys out to make sure that everybody was okay. She stood there looking out over the mountain, and it was a little while before she realized that her dad had taken off towards the shed where they'd brought the body of her brother. I'm going to go see Sam one last time, he said, and Sarah followed him, feeling like she needed to keep an eye on everyone. Her dad made it around the corner of the shed before she could catch up, and that's when she heard a gunshot. Sarah hurried over and found him around the other side of the shed, which stood between them and the mountain where the gunshot had come from. He was half crouched, holding himself. He'd been shot. He seemed shocked and confused, like he didn't realize what had happened. Sarah's survival instinct kicked in. She told her dad they had to get back to the house. She put her hand on his back and said, "Go." At that point, Sarah's mother came out on the front porch. She was holding the door open, asking what had happened. And Sarah's dad said he'd been shot, and she started screaming for them to get into the house. So crouching, Sarah and her dad headed toward the front porch with Kevin following behind them. Sarah was pushing her dad through the door next to her mom, who was holding baby Elisheba and still screaming for them to get in when she heard this giant boom right in her ear, like somebody had fired a gun next to her. She felt things hit her face. Her mother dropped to the ground, and Kevin fell into the house from behind her. Sarah was still standing, not understanding anything. It took her a second to comprehend that her mother had died, and that it was parts of her mother that had hit her face.
Oh my God.
Kevin was on the ground moaning. Her sister Rachel was screaming. Her father was screaming, and Sarah's ears were still ringing. That's when her father scooped up baby Elisheba, handed her to Rachel, and pulled Sarah's mom into the house so they could close the door. At that moment, it seemed clear that these people weren't here to talk, that there would be no discussion. If Sammy's death had been an accident, Sarah thought, this certainly wasn't. The family was being hunted. I was just like, that made me cry when I read that out loud the first time. I'm not even playing.
That's just so sad, dude.
It really is. So as Kevin Harris, the friend, tumbled into the house, another shot from the sniper went through the glass window, and that's when it entered Vicky Weaver's temple, killing her instantly. The bullet and fragments of Vicky's skull that was what injured Kevin Harris in his arm and torso, even breaking a rib and puncturing one of his lungs. And he apparently even begged Randy, like, dude, just kill me, bro. Like, just take me out of my misery, you know, which was a part of why he let Kevin surrender a day earlier, which is really interesting story. But so the sniper Lon Horiuchi was a West Point graduate armed with state-of-the-art sniping equipment and trained to be accurate to within a quarter inch at 200 yards. Okay, this is the guy who said it was an accident. He claims he missed Kevin and hit Vicky by accident. Lon Horiuchi would also play a prominent role in the Waco siege less than 6 months after Ruby Ridge. And Bo Gritz, the guy I keep mentioning, the former Green Beret commander who eventually negotiated Randy Weaver's surrender, he said that after he became a negotiator, this is crazy, the FBI showed him a psychological profile of the family prepared for the Marshal Service before the siege that described Vicky as the dominant member of the family, that Vicky was the maternal head of the family, and Gritz told the Spokane Spokesman Review, I believe Vicky was shot purposely by the sniper as a priority target. The profile said, if you get a chance, take Vicky Weaver out. Right? And like, he then later, like, Bo's a weird story. Like, he has like this crazy, very interesting perspective on Jonestown as well, by the way. And he apparently even trained a lot of the Afghan Mujahideen fighters in America at military bases in America in the 80s. Like, he was training up Afghan Mujahideen, which became Al-Qaeda, you know, which is just so nuts. But anyway, he says like some crazy thing about Jonestown, where he says, I think the Jonestown incident was an extension of In Search of the Manchurian Candidate. I think those people were conditioned to act in certain ways and would have probably just moved from the facility in Montreal, where CIA mind control experiments were carried out under the direction of Dr. Ewan Cameron, who that guy like got people to believe that the interrogators were their parents, like completely forgetting who their parents were and breaking them down into infants like they were newborn babies. And they had to spend years redeveloping an adult personality. It's like the craziest thing you could ever hear. And apparently he said that they would just send those people to Guyana in that case. And he said, look at Jim Jones' background carefully.
Whoa, that's crazy.
Right? He goes, he had a lot of intelligence contacts there for doing exactly what he did. It escalated once they killed Congressman Leo Ryan, which I think he was a huge thorn in the side.
Yeah.
At that time, he was researching and investigating MK Ultra.
Yep.
And he was going to MK Ultra facilities, and like he was like such a radical congressman. I never heard of a congressman like faking as if he would go into like San Quentin and act like undercover, like he was he was going to prison to see how they treated prisoners. Like, that's just a crazy story. But they killed him on purpose throughout that. I'll finish with Bo Gritz's little thing and then get back to Ruby Ridge. But he basically said that they had no other way to go, so they just tried to self-destruct the whole mission, and that means the death of hundreds of people. As I point out in the book, the medical examiner there made some startling statements. Yeah, something Mutu, Leslie Mutu, I think was his name. He like blew open the whole Jonestown scenario. And he says, and we wouldn't even allow the bodies to be properly examined when they were brought back to the East Coast and turned in. So obviously it was a cover-up. Jonestown, I think, was an extension of MK Ultra from the CIA, and there are probably other experiments going on, which I believe that. I mean, I don't think MK Ultra ever stopped either, you know, but
no, they never stopped. Nobody went to jail, nothing.
Yeah.
Well, dude,
I'm almost done, bro. This is the very end. We can finish if you want. We don't.
Yeah. Finish. I
know we've got sidetracked a lot. I apologize, but
no, it's okay. This has been an insanely great episode.
So, meanwhile, upon arrival, right? Or no, I'm sorry. Both men in the cabin had sustained those terrible injuries, right? And so, let's see the reports. Yeah, here we go. This was crazy, man. So, meanwhile, upon the arrival of the hundreds of federal agents surrounding the cabin, setting up a base of operations down the ridge, they would name. This was directly after they shot and killed Vicky, right? Because the negotiators haven't even arrived. Then they set up the camp. And after they had shot and instantly killed Vicky, they named the camp Camp Vicky, right? The base of operations.
My God.
Yeah, dude. And after the dead wife and mother. And according to multiple reports, including the book co-written by Sarah and Randy, documenting their firsthand experience, the negotiators during the siege after Vicky had been killed were taunting them every morning by using a loudspeaker and saying things like, "How is Vicky this morning? Did she make you breakfast? We had pancakes. We had blueberry pancakes." They would say shit like this. And apparently they even brought up Sammy saying something about playing with toys and stuff. Like, terrible, man.
Oh my God.
Yep. And the negotiators would admit to saying all these things over the loudspeaker, and but they later pretended in court that they didn't realize that they had been dead, right? That they were killed. But that was the way of, yeah.
Dude, you honestly, bro, this shit's nuts.
It really is. But so the report of the Ruby Ridge Task Force shows on August 23rd, repeated attempts to negotiate with Weaver via a bullhorn failed. There was no response from the cabin, and later it would be reported that by Monday, August 24th, the fourth day of the siege, Danny Colson, the FBI director, or deputy assistant director, wrote a memo with the headline, "Something to Consider," and listed 4 considerations. 1, charge against Weaver is bullshit. 2, no one saw Weaver do any shooting. 3, Vicky has no charges against her. 4, Weaver's defense. He ran down the hill to see what dog was barking at. Some guys in camis shot his dog, started shooting at him, killed his son. Harris did the shooting. He is in pretty strong legal position. Both men in the cabin had sustained critical injuries, and Vicky's body would spend the next 11 days lying in the kitchen covered with a sheet under the table.
Oh,
the standoff with a 10-month-old baby in that situation. They said when she was shot, the baby they thought was dead as well at first because it was only covered in blood. Its mother's blood, like, oh my God. So here's where they finally decide to talk to these people. What a concept, And so the standoff would ultimately resolve. It wouldn't ultimately resolve until the FBI allowed third-party civilian negotiators to become involved because Randy had become so distrustful. And by Sunday, August 30th, that's when Bo Gritz, the former Special Forces officer and Green Beret commander, would begin mediation, finally being allowed to approach the cabin in an effort to convince Randy that they could end this with a peaceful conclusion.
It's too late for that.
Right. So by this time, Kevin's wounds were like becoming infected seriously. And he urged Randy to, like I said, to end his suffering. And so Randy allowed him to surrender. And Harris was airlifted out by an Air Force medical evacuation helicopter to a medical facility in Spokane. And that same day, Randy also negotiated the removal of Sammy and Vicky's bodies. And this is crazy. The story goes here that 4 agents in full body armor came into the cabin and picked up Vicky's body with Randy holding a gun in hand and he stopped them and he said, "I'll kill you if you let her body touch the ground." Right. And I was just like, this guy, I love this guy. Right. Like, he's a hero, man. So I'm here to close this out. It says the commander of the FBI hostage rescue team told Gritz he would resolve the standoff by launching an all-out tactical assault if he couldn't get the remaining Weavers to surrender by a certain deadline. And so the next day, August 31st, Gritz would finally convince Randy to surrender by explaining to him this was their last chance to get out of the cabin alive, and he had to leave in order to save his remaining children. In the end, according to Gritz, the decision came down to 16-year-old daughter Sarah, who by this time had become so terrified the government wouldn't keep its end of the bargain. She had become super reluctant to let her father surrender. And Grits recalled her dad saying, Sarah, we've got to do this. And finally, Sarah agreed. So she was like paranoid, out of her mind, 16-year-old little girl. And then there's a book written by Jess Walter about this that's super critical piece. It's a great book, but he says this, and it's so poignant, man. I mean, in the 9 years since the standoff at Ruby Ridge, and in the 6 years since this book first appeared, much has happened, yet little has changed. And by the way, this book's called Ruby Ridge, The Truth and Tragedy of the Randy Weaver Family. And he says, tens of millions of dollars have been spent on hearings and investigations that failed to resolve the most basic questions about the standoff. Almost $3.5 million was paid out in settlements that settled nothing. 9 years later, the courts are still flip-flopping over whether a federal agent should be tried for his actions at Ruby Ridge. Investigators, lawyers, and federal officers are still debating who shot first. Top FBI officials are still denying that they approved the Bureau's unprecedented and illegal orders to shoot civilians without provocation. And 9 years later, the sniper who killed Vicky Weaver still works for the FBI. The case continues to hum on internet websites and scream from right-wing newspapers. The words Ruby Ridge are fixed at the bottom of every news story about the 10-year crisis of confidence and competence in the FBI. And every time a person holes up in a ramshackle house, every time a suspect refuses to come out, every time a person accuses the government of going too far, someone is likely to say, we don't want this to become another Ruby Ridge. The Weaver case gave a name to that sometimes dangerous space between people and their government. It brought paranoia into the mainstream. For how can you convince people that their government isn't out to get them when on Ruby Ridge, the FBI gave itself permission to shoot its own citizens? How can you tell people to trust the government that covered up details of the case and assigned agents to investigate themselves? So
we live in crazy times, dude. We live in crazy times. I'll basically end this with a Tolstoy quote. All right. Because this to me, and this is how I started it in my podcast about Ruby Ridge. Very short, but it's crazy because he said this so many years ago, and we really have to ask ourselves, like, who was the real enemy to fear that day, right? I mean, it's pretty simple question to answer in my mind, but this Tolstoy quote says, understand then, all of you, especially the young, that to want to impose an imaginary state of government onto others by violence is not only a vulgar superstition, but even a criminal work. Understand that this work, far from assuring the well-being of humanity, is only a lie, a more or less unconscious hypocrisy, camouflaging the lowest passions we possess. Damn, dude. That's great. Thank you so much, Austin. You crushed it. I really do appreciate it, dude. You came in here. You dropped the hammer of the gods on us. Real quick, tell them where they can find you again.
So my podcast is called The Underclass Podcast. You can follow me on Twitter at UnderclassPod. And then Instagram is The Underclass Podcast. And I want to say really quickly, man, I appreciate you guys. Seriously, thank you, Sam. Like, I'm such a big fan of you guys. Like, Tinfoil, you're my Joe Rogan, like, straight up. I say that.
You're very nice.
To my wife. No, I'm not playing, but
I have way more body fat.
But I don't say this just to make you feel good for having me on or anything. Honestly, you guys, like, it's weird because when you listen to a podcast, you know how it is. Like, it feels like you know these people, right? But so I've spent a lot of time wishing I could say something in response. You know what I mean? Like, oh shit. But anyway, I just wanted to say, man, I'm a huge fan. I admire you. I admire you for having such an open mind and being willing to have a conversation with almost anyone. and just trying to discern for yourself what is true and what is not. And that's all we can expect from people. It's like,
well,
that's the best kind of person.
Buddy. You're a G, so go check out the links below. Check out Austin's show. I want to thank everybody again who's contributed to the Indiegogo for Chaos Twins. And if you haven't, please help us. We're trying to put together the best possible project we can. Product. We want to put out a wonderful, wonderful comic book series for children. So go check it out. That's chaostwins.com. I got the revival coming up on the 24th. I'm at El Monte on December 12th. So go check those out. I love you all very much. Thank you guys for everything you do. Thank you for supporting us. And please stay tuned for some info on our affiliates program. And check out these highlights from my other podcasts. Thank you, guys. Enjoy the highlights.
Here's a clip from the latest Broken Sim.
All right, funny. so that's let's get into what we wanted to talk about, which was the Bill Burr situation.
Okay, yeah.
Bill Burr. I'm a huge fan, and I consider him a friend.
He's getting a lot of shit right now.
Getting a lot of shit about him and his wife. We're at the UFC fight. Donald Trump comes in, gets a humongous standing O. Let's remember this. Donald Trump gets a huge standing O, comes in with Tucker Carlson, Kid Rock, the Trump brothers.
That's a cool group, huh?
Right? I mean, it's fun. So he comes in, and
here's the video.
So there's a shot of Trump. Bill Burr's behind him. And his wife is there. And
Trump is standing, and Burr and his wife are seated behind Trump in the crowd.
Hit play.
All right, here we go. Let me just play that one more time.
That was it. Now, some people have tried to play it off that she's flipping off Kid Rock, but he's not there yet.
Well, she could just be flipping off the camera,
She is flipping off the camera, but she knows exactly who they're shooting.
Yeah.
She's not stupid.
So. Yeah.
Johnny, I want to hear your thoughts, and then I'll give my thoughts.
I don't care. I just don't care about this. It doesn't
Johnny,
bother me at all.
Let me just tell you something. I have a lot more respect for her doing that than all of these dog shit people in Texas, and I love Texas, who are cheering George Bush Jr. at all these sporting events. Like, I have way more respect for that.
Yeah.
And listen, this isn't an arena where you got a standing O and one person's flipping him off. Okay? I mean, I am for this is the First Amendment. This is what you're supposed to do.
I would love to know what Bill Burr's thinking.
Oh, listen, even though he probably agrees with the sentiment, he's probably like,
yeah.
And listen, again, I love Bill Burr. I'm Team Bill Burr. I'll always be on Team Bill Burr. I'll always defend comedians when cancel culture comes. And I don't know if it's coming for him, but they're giving a lot of shit to his wife. And, I don't have a problem with it. He just got an arena applauding for him. One person. And this is SamTripoli doing stand-up, basically what everybody else is doing. I'm crushing in the room and one person's mean mugging me. Yeah. That's all I'm focusing on is the one person mean mugging me.
Yeah.
Okay? Right? I
don't care.
I don't have a problem with it.
Yeah.
I don't have any problems with it. I love it. You can't do that. Now, the question is she representing Bill Burr the best at this moment?
No, of course not. Yeah.
And that is an issue between him and her. And I want to say to anybody here that is really upset with this and are upset with Bill Burr, and this goes back to my RFK thing with his wife.
I was just thinking it.
Right? It's like when you're with strong-minded women, they do what they want to do. And it's like RFK said, sometimes you're not the king of your castle all the time.
Yep. Sometimes you're not the king of your own castle.
But
there's a spider web across the camera.
All I have to say is this. If they were at an event and it was Nina's event and there was a big camera on them and Bill Burr flipped off somebody pretty important at her event, how do you think she would handle it? I
don't know her, but probably.
Well, we know women, right?
Wouldn't be into it.
So that's it. That's my only thing. It's like those seats are obviously been given to him by either.
But this is a speech issue. It's free speech.
No, 100%.
100%.
I am 100% Team Bill Burr on
And
this.
if you have a problem with that at home, take it out with them personally, not as a speech thing, not saying they shouldn't be doing that.
Or it's like, and like, listen, dude, I listen, do I like Trump? Yeah. Trump, he's my favorite war criminal out of all the war criminals. Okay.
Yeah, I've noticed that. Yeah.
Right? Like I like him more than I like the other war criminals, but I'm making no illusions. Like, you remember, he's the guy that gave Bill Gates $10 billion, which Bill Gates kind of turned around and used to buy up all the farmland, right?
Yeah.
I mean,
yeah, no, he gave a lot of people money that didn't deserve it.
He's the guy that put BlackRock in charge of the Fed. And listen, I prefer him over the other guys.
He kept on droning innocent people. Yeah.
He's the guy that made it tried to make it an EO executive order to ban free speech on campuses for Israel. Okay, so like, there's a lot of reasons you should be given double fingers. Okay. I like Trump. He's a president. You should be able to do truth to power. That's my opinion.
You like Trump?
Well, Johnny, if I had to pick, it's like, hey, who's your favorite?
Nobody's making you pick, though.
What?
You don't have to pick, though.
Well, I mean, if we're picking out of the presidents, I like him more than the other ones, but I'm not, I don't think any of these presidents have our best interests.
Okay. Yeah, I agree with that.
He seems to be more nationalist than the rest of them, but, or localist, or patriotic.
I think he's completely self-interested, and whatever side of these issues that worked the best for him, he would be on. Because he used to be,
Johnny,
he used to be wildly like pro-abortion. He was Democrat, gave money to Clintons. You know, he was Democrat, and then I think he saw this opening. He's a smart guy. There's no denying that. He saw this opening to become the president and pursue power, and he took it. You know, and we're just fortunate that many of these issues that benefit us as a country also happen to be, what would you say, expeditious for him. So
yeah.
Anyway,
so
no, I do, and I love how he tweaks the left. I fucking love that.
Yeah, I do too.
The best.
The people that don't like him are the people I don't like. So
yeah, exactly.
In their
it's
aspect,
like with Elon.
I like him.
I feel the same way about Elon. Yeah.
Yeah, I like them. Are they perfect? No. And do I expect them to save me? No.
It'd be a hell of a lot better than the current president.
Yeah, that's
Biden.
my whole thing.
Yeah.
If I could go, okay, let's just go through presidents. Joe Biden, Trump, Obama, George Bush, who else do we got?
Dick Cheney.
Yeah. So you go through all these guys. Who would you like out of them the most?
Yeah, you mean the living presidents?
Yeah. I mean, well,
Yeah,
dude, if
no
I go all the
choice
way
there.
back, maybe, Jimmy Carter, but I think we have a weird revisionist version of Jimmy Carter. But if I had it my way,
Gerald Ford,
no.
Richard Nixon,
No.
Ronald Reagan.
No.
Let's see, Kennedy, maybe
JFK.
Yeah.
Maybe, but probably Andrew Jackson. That's
Like,
how far back I'm going.
Andrew Jackson, dude,
Yeah.
he killed so many people.
Yeah, but he got rid of the Fed, and I'm okay with that.
He killed a lot of Indians.
Okay, I'm sorry to the Indians. I will go to your casinos and make up for
You
it.
could say you love Lincoln, but Lincoln, I mean, did a lot of bad things in the
Again,
war.
they're all war criminals,
Yeah.
bro. It's
Crazy.
like, who's your favorite war? It's like, who's your favorite horror flick slasher, right?
Yeah,
It's like,
it's
I like Jason Voorhees.
Yeah.
I like Freddy Krueger. It's like they're all psychopath murderers,
Impossible. It's
right?
impossible.
So that's my
I've
opinion.
been reading the Civil
Team
War
Bill,
books I was telling you
Team
about.
Bill Burr. I personally wouldn't do that to my significant other. That's just me. That's my opinion.
I've been reading those.
But I'm on Team Burr.
Speaking of presidents, I've been reading those Civil War books I was telling you about. And Lincoln, dude, complicated guy. But the thing that impressed me most about all of them is that they were, we think people have changed. People haven't changed. They were so sassy back then. The guy who wrote the books has all the documents, all the telegraphs that they sent back and forth privately to each other were all saved and became public record. They were so sassy to each other. The president to the generals to
Or
each
were they
other.
like, listen up, bitch?
Just like, Lincoln's got this famous quote of like, hey, could I borrow the army since you don't seem to be doing anything with it? I mean, that's like a direct quote.
That's what I love.
Yeah, and there's just so much sass
Dude,
going on between
I
these guys.
think that's much better than the presentation. Like when you hear Nixon, he's like, oh, they're doing a lot of gay shit and Bohemian Grove. I'm like, I'm down.
Yeah, I wish if you see that too. Anytime a candidate for president loses,
then they just become a normal person and start going on, doing the circuit and talking normally. And you're like, why didn't you do that when you're running?
Well, it's my whole thing is like, the thing that people hate about Trump is that like he was very brash. But I like that. Hey guys, real quick, I want to tell you about a couple things you can find on the website, SamTripoli.com. It's everything you need. Audio, video, all there of all my podcasts across the board. You can also get my dates there. You can also get t-shirts there. We are adding t-shirts all the time. We just added a more de-essing, less bombing. I love that one, okay? We also got Yahweh or the Highway new shirts are there. They should be up. It's a great way to support the show. Grab your t-shirts now. I got more magic coming. I also have a mental gymnastics one everyone's going to really like. Listen, if you want to support the show, rockfin.com, $15. You get all my shows across all the boards. We also have Cash Daddies, patreon.com/Cash Daddies. Great way to make money in these difficult markets. We also have some affiliates. I'm going to hit them out real quick. If you're looking for gold and silver, a great way to go to Wise Wolf. Click the banner. Hydrogen brown gas. Everyone loves it. Harley Ray, our good friends in Candles and Crystals. You can use the promo code SWARM15. Click that one. And Tim James, who was just on the show, universally loved. You can get a discount on all of his stuff on his website. Chemical Free Body. And then finally, Joel Staley, who's going to help me lose weight and get ready to rock. All those there. Click the banners. Support them. Support us. It's a great way. And all my audio, all my video, again, right there at SamTripoli.com. Enjoy the highlights.
And now, a highlight from Cash Daddies.
I get all these Zillow ads for houses. And for the first time, a 3-bedroom, 3-bathroom house in Thousand Oaks, which is an amazing area, was $700,000.
They're dropping.
I think you're looking at people going, they're saying this market is about to implode. I need to get out quickly. And I mean, $700,000. That's an insane number for basically Los Angeles. Thousand Oaks is more Ventura, but still, that's an insanely good area. 3-bedroom. Even if it's a dump, you could take $300,000, put in there, and you'd still be break even.
Yeah, I mean, we still don't have a lot of supply. Rates are high. I think they are going to come down, but I think we're going to see prices drop, man. I mean, in certain areas. I think in New York they're going to drop. They're still high. There's no supply. There's a ton of there still is demand, but I just see prices at some point will drop a little bit. And the bottom line is, even if they don't, if interest rates drop, houses will become more affordable. That's what we want. So I see them raising rates one more time, and that's it. But hopefully the CPI number comes in slow tomorrow, and that'll help everything. Good shit, man. The economy's in decent shape right now. People are still working. Wages are solid. I mean, it could be a lot worse. And, people ask, they say, well, what about all these geopolitical problems? Like, we got a war in Ukraine. There's a war in Israel. The market doesn't seem to give a shit, man. I mean, war's horrible. It's not good. Nobody wants it.
War is horrible, dude. War is horrible.
Nobody wants it. But, I don't have a say in what goes on. So, let's look. I still like oil and energy. I think that's going to go higher. The Middle East isn't going to calm down anytime soon. I mean, we're bombing some of these guys in Syria. So was it Syria? Yeah, Syria. So, you got to look at different sectors. Utilities are getting hammered. I kind of like that sector now. It's gotten just crushed. You got to put your money in things that you think can go up. But there's good news. The 10-year Treasury was at 5%. That was not good. Now it's down to 4.65. Wouldn't surprise me if that goes up a little bit. We'll see tomorrow. Tomorrow's big. CPI number is going to be huge. So you got the S&P right around 4,400. That's a little bit of resistance. Could go a little higher, but I think from now until December, I think you got to get defensive. You got to stack dry powder, being things that pay nice dividends. Because it wouldn't surprise me if we see a little sell-off. You still got the S&P up 15% for the year. NASDAQ's up 32%. We could see a nice little sell-off here this week, and then the Patreon boys will bank again. So
Patreon boys go round the outside, round the outside.
We bank it.
Yes.
That's what we do.
We go deep, homeboy. Aaron, open your mind. Drink from the fountain of knowledge. There's lizard people everywhere. That's some interdimensional shit. Wake up, Aaron.
This is only the beginning.
Dude, you just blew my mind.
It is so hilarious to me